Hi, everybody. Tina Brock, producing artistic director here at the Idiopathic Radiculopathy Consortium in Philadelphia. I'm your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation. I do hope you'll join us the next 50 minutes. Sit back and relax as we explore the lives, the hearts, the minds, and the spirits of creators in Philadelphia region and around the world. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Into the Absurd. I'm your host for today's show, Tina Brock, and alongside Erica Holscher and Bob Schmidt will be talking today with Philadelphia-based actress and performer Trudy Graboyes, and we're very excited to talk to her about a one-woman show that she's working on. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great weekend, and we look forward to your questions in the chat for Trudy and your questions in general. We're going to be spending the next 15 minutes delving into musical theater and what it is like to create a one-person show. And we'll be here during the Fringe Festival as well, so if you find yourself on Saturdays at 5 p.m., looking for a way to connect with creators and artists in the community, join us here on Into the Absurd, and we hope that you'll share this information with your friends. On today's show, Trudy Graboyes, I believe that I might have gotten to know Trudy, but we'll get this straight when she comes on, maybe in the standardized patient program here in Philadelphia, or maybe it is just that as a community, we all know each other pretty well here in Philadelphia, and Trudy has been an actress and a singer and a performer for many, many years, playing some really great roles in stages in musical theater, including Annie Get Your Gun and the Addams Family. And I'm very excited to talk to Trudy about her work in musical theater and this new one-woman show that is a history of her grandmother's immigration from Europe. So let's get Trudy to the table right now. Trudy Graboyes, welcome to Into the Absurd.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. I'm okay. You know, we were talking just before the show, Trudy, about, it's this time of year right before the Fringe Festival where theater comes alive and starts to get into high gear for the rest of the year. And there's just a great deal of ennui about all that right now. And, as a performer who's just constantly working and busy out there on local stages in musical theater, I guess I'm going to start with this question, and that is, what is the thing that you miss the most?
Oh, I miss performing. In fact, I was watching the rehearsal for the first Lion King show that's coming, and I started to cry because there's nothing like hearing the effect that you have on an audience. It certainly is not the same as when you're live streaming and you can't hear anything. What I most also love is the craft of it all. So the creation of it, putting it all together, researching a character, and the icing on the cake is the performance. So it's just the feedback is what I miss most from an audience.
Are you a performer who enjoys the performance as much as rehearsal, or do you get a great deal out of rehearsal? I've heard many people say they actually really enjoy rehearsal in some ways more than performance because it opens doors to be able to understand yourself in relation to the work and other people. You can make the mistakes there, you can explore things, and then hopefully you keep exploring when you're on stage. But so how do you feel about that, rehearsal versus the stage?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the rehearsal is a labor of love. So everything that you're researching about the character, and I can specifically point to Mama Rose, which is a role that I played twice, 14 years apart, and played it very differently between the two roles. The most challenging role that a female can play in musical theater history is Mama Rose. And so much has to be worked out in the rehearsal, and then you just put it out there on stage. And things are always being discovered because, this particular show is so well written, but a lot of people have played her one-dimensional, almost as if she was just a complete monster, and she isn't. From the research that I did, which I love doing, and the latest book that was written about her, which was Mama's Turn, Rose's Turn, Mama Rose's Turn, and learn from that she was walked out by her father and her boyfriends, and finally both of her daughters. So what does that do to a person? How vulnerable does that? So that has to show up. She clearly loved her children. And so there's a soft spot there. And they both were successful. So she had to have some kind of, not only being ambitious, but she had to have some kind of brains to be able to know how to make these daughters successful. So there's so many different components, and it was intriguing to me to learn about that.
Yeah. How did you change what changed for you over the 14 years in the way that you portrayed initially versus following? Is there, say, a couple of things you could point to that you're like, wow, this is so very different for me now?
Such a great question, Tina. Her sensitivity to other people is what changed. And in fact, I did hear from people that saw both versions, your portrayal of her changed. There was a lighter side to her in some respects. And why would Herbie, her boyfriend, have loved her if there wasn't that lighter side to her that he noticed?
So did you know that was happening for you as you were rehearsing it the second time? Did you say to yourself, wow, I mean, could you feel it?
I could feel it. And I like that. It was just a deeper character.
And do you feel that it's because you understood the character differently because you yourself had changed?
Oh.
Or did you just, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. I think it's a combination of my having changed through life and life experiences and reading up about her. So it's a combination of both.
And did you read up on her the first time you did the role?
I did, but that book hadn't come out yet. And that really shed a lot of light upon who she was. And I would say that of all the people that have played that particular role, Rosalind Russell was my favorite, and Angela Lansbury, because they had the same take, not so much vocally. I think that Betty Buckley probably was my favorite vocally, but Rosalind Russell, I feel, really nailed it.
And what makes you say that?
Well, she was tough, but then she could hold it back. And then she had a realistic, honest breakdown when she had to.
So the variety of emotional color and the authenticity of what she was doing. When you were a little girl, did you imagine yourself on stages?
Yeah, I think that I was 5 years old when I decided I have to make a decision about my life and what I want to be. And it was at 5 that I decided that I wanted to do something with theater. I remember saying to myself, I want to be a movie star, which of course never happened. But very interested at 5 years old. I was always musical. They say that I came home from the hospital and I was on my mother's belly and was tapping to the beat of the rhythm of the song that was playing on the radio. And then when I was 2 and could hardly speak, we were celebrating Passover. And I didn't know any man, Ishtana Halala Hazat, didn't know that. But the only song I did know was Mary Had a Little Lamb. So of course I walked around the table singing, Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was light as and said, Man, Ishtana Halala. So that's a family joke. Sound of Music was an inspiration to me. It was at that point that I started watching verbal and nonverbal communication and the way people walked and talked. And for some reason, that was a real inspiration. And Peter Pan, because he never grew up and I never wanted to grow up. Peter Pan.
Yeah, I see it. So great. Now, did your parents take you to the theater as a child, or were you exposed to the arts when you were growing up?
I was. I have to say that, yes, we would go to the theater. I remember my grandfather taking me to see the Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall. My father, who was a scientist, was quite the storyteller. So he was funny. He would be the one to tell us stories before we went to bed. And he would have each one of us on a knee And my second, I have two sisters, I'm in the middle, was like on his lap, and he would tell the story of Cinderella, but he would say, oh, there was this crazy girl. She would sit by the cinders. They called her Cinderella. I don't know why she did that. She was so crazy. So he would change everything around according to the way he wanted to tell the story. And he would act out every part. So though he was a scientist, he was extremely dramatic. We used to have Thanksgiving, and he would sit around the fireplace and make up these science fiction stories that my cousins still remember today. And he would just make it up as he went along. He just loved that. And he loved The Man of La Mancha. That was his favorite musical. And he was so excited when they went in, they saw the show in New York, they came back. And he just acted out every role. So I was very happy when I got the role of Aldonza one year, and he came and saw that. And that was the last show that they ever saw me in, because unfortunately he passed away, but that's another story.
But he did get to see you perform.
He came to every show that I was in, but that was his favorite musical. So that was cool.
Yeah. When you were in college and when you were preparing for to follow your dream, were there specific roles that you had in mind that you wanted to pursue, or was your feeling just more I just want to work, and I just want to be out there, and I want to be experiencing this and getting better, and just working on my craft?
I was in college, and I was a theater minor and part of the children's theater ensemble, and wrote a song at that time. And we would go and perform at different elementary schools and do workshops with the children. And I really did enjoy that. Didn't enjoy touring, but I did enjoy performing with the children and writing the music. There's a lot of roles that I wanted to play, but I learned at a very early age that it was certainly not going to be the ingenue role. It was going to be character roles. And I have to thank my mother for that, because she sat me down and said, look, this is the reality of the situation. You're a character actress. Those are the roles you should go for. And that's always what I did realistically. But specifically, whatever anybody wanted to give me was fine with me. And I was going to work it out, because I did like the work.
Well, it goes back to what you said originally, and that is just to be in the space, the things that we miss so much, to be in the space, to be working closely with a group of people, to be working through all of those challenges, those artistic challenges, is when that's not there, and it's not there for a long period of time, you really, so I hear you, to be able to just have those opportunities. And then, as your career goes on and a role comes up that you really want to play, it's like, I'd love to do this. When you say you didn't love touring, what was it about touring that just didn't sit straight?
I like to be in one place.
Yeah, no, totally. That's a lot, right? I mean, part of what's so great about theater is like is the being able to do it every night with kind of the same wheels in place, but then to make it different. And when I was wondering about that. The reason I asked is I've not ever been on tour, and wondered like how many, it seems like it would present or could present considerable challenges.
Yeah. With the venue, you're always having to change, and that's okay. I can be flexible, but I like being in one spot.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense. Your one-woman show, Her Strength, Our Story. Tell me about when you decided that a one-person show was in your future.
I had done women shows before. I started out doing producing, directing concert versions of musicals. I did community theater. I didn't like having the loss of control. Waiting to see, are you going to be cast? Are you not going to be cast? They don't like you because you look like an aunt that they hated their whole life. There wasn't that control. And I wanted to take the reins and do my own thing. So I created a show called Leading Ladies, which profiled a lot of Jewish women through the ages: Molly Pecan, Barbara Streisand, Fanny Brice. And then, as I said, I did produce with one of my partners, concert versions of musicals. So we did Bye Bye Birdie, and we did Man of La Mancha. Man of La Mancha, they gave me the royalty, and they said, we want the music out there, so we didn't have to pay royalties for that. Bye Bye Birdie, we did. We got what's his name? Bobby Rydell came to see it. So he played Huey in the movie, not Huey. Yeah. I can't remember the character's name right now, but we got him to see it because I put on Facebook that I was looking for him, and the president of his fan club got in touch with me, who got in touch with his wife, who called me and said he loves coming to things like this. So he came. So that was exciting.
Yeah.
And then I always wanted to do, well, not recently wanted to do an immigrant show because we were living in such trying times. And immigrants were going through some really difficult times. So I thought, okay, well, who could I do? And I started researching. And then I thought, wait a minute, what better immigrant than my own grandmother, who was an opera singer, and her family overcame incredible obstacles as they fled really from Russia to Poland to Germany and finally ended up in America. It's an incredible story. So when I was in college, I flew to Florida to interview my grandmother and my grandfather and got their stories on tape. And then I lost the tapes. So 2 years ago, I couldn't find them, and I wanted to do this show. It was like really a burning desire. And I started interviewing my sisters and her only living child, my aunt, Harriet. And there was a book written about her sister, my great aunt Pauline. So I put it together like a puzzle and, interviewed and researched like I was doing a part. And every time I found another piece, I was so excited. Then, of course, I had written a song already about my grandfather's life and how he met my grandmother. And that was going to be part of the show. There's so many different things that have inspired me along the way. Another song as a march is part of the show. And then I wrote another one about my grandmother's struggle, which is part of when she came here and she was in New York working in the garment industry. And then I heard this beautiful song that Julie Gold, who is a Grammy award-winning singer-songwriter from this area, from the Havertown area. And it was perfect for the show. So I got in touch with her and asked her if I could use it. And she goes, use it with my love. And I will not charge you anything. So if I have time, maybe I'll sing a little bit of that for you. But with each piece, I was so excited. And then there was the process of trying to get the right costume. This hat is part of the costume. So I started researching and calling people. And there was one theater I will not mention in Philadelphia who laughed in my face and said, you've got a budget and you're never going to find anybody with that amount of money that you want to pay. But I did. I got the next call was from this person who said, I'm new to the area. I want to get my feet wet. And she did a great job in putting together my costume. And that's Andrea Rouse, a little plug for her. Jeff McDonnell is a wonderful musician. And he took my music and he put it on tape, and it's all on tape and ready to go. And Sonia Robson she redid the pictures. She restored my family pictures and blew them up. And I used that to help tell the story as well. So everything came into play. And then in the end, right before I did my very first show this year, I found my grandmother's tapes.
No, where did you find them?
I was leaving the house to go to the show, and my husband went into the secretariat's desk that we got from my grandmother. And he said, what is this wrapped in this tote bag? And I'm like, oh, and I opened it up and there were her tapes after it was all complete.
Yeah. I'm just curious, when you realized you didn't have the tapes or you had misplaced the tapes, did you try to, from your memory of the conversations, did you try to recreate it that way, or did you have faith that you would find the tapes, or how did you feel? Did you feel you had lost?
I felt a loss. I didn't think I was going to find them again. And I was able to recreate from my memory, my two sisters' memories, my aunt, her daughter, and the book that was written for my Aunt Pauline. So it was put together. Then I listened to the tapes. Oh, and I had the tapes made into a disc, which I will probably play at the performances. And to hear her voice again, because she, as I said, was an opera singer, had the most beautiful, colorful voice. And to hear that again, it was just so emotional. And there were things that I did not remember that I have since added to the show from those
Did
tapes.
you use part of the recordings part of the show as well, or the details from the recordings? I mean, did you?
The details from the recordings are in the show, but I do play the tapes after my question answer period. I play the tapes.
Have you performed the show yet?
I did perform it at a senior center nearby.
When did you begin the process of the show?
That was in June.
June of 2020?
Of this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was booked at 4 or 5 different venues in 2020. And then, of course, it was all postponed because of COVID. I did a little short live stream from the show for one of the centers that booked me. Kelly's Music Center in Havertown is where it will be on September the 12th. And I did a little live stream for them. This one I did for a senior center in the area. My mom's there. And it went over really well. One of the residents asked me how many hundreds of times I'd done it. And I said, "Are you serious? This was my debut. But what was really cool about the performance was these were elderly people, and it brought back so many memories of their immigrant parents. So they were sharing all these amazing stories of their parents that came from Ireland and Italy and Germany and Russia. And one woman came to me at the end and she said to me, and I'll never forget this, "You have inspired me to write again."
Oh.
That's all you can ask for.
That's all you can ask for, is that in some way someone is artistically changed or motivated to follow something. That's beautiful, Trudy. In the play, do you play your grandmother or do you play a variety of characters?
You know, it's so funny. That's such a good question. I play my grandmother. I turn into her. At the beginning, I am myself. And then there's something that I do that transfers me into my grandmother. And then I come back out of it. So there's different ways that I do that. But one of my friends asked me that question. She said, "I can see this as a movie and I can see all these different people playing all these different, and it wouldn't be hard to do." So who knows? We'll see. Right now, it's just me.
Do you feel like there's a possibility for it to be a virtual, there to be a virtual component of it? Or is that just, it needs to be live?
I'm not sure. I think right now it needs to be live. I really like getting the feedback. And I think it's a story, whether it's virtual or not, that needs to be told because of the resilience that my grandmother and her family went through and the love that they had for each other that really helped support what they ended up doing. You know, it's such a good question. And it could be virtual if it was written, because there's so many different characters that could enter upon the scene.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I was just thinking, because there's a friend who does a lot of historical in live and historical characters in Philadelphia, and was talking about how her show was, she had done so many virtual shows, learned technology and mastered all of this over the last year, and how that challenge really just gave her a lot of strength in being able to bring it to audiences when we couldn't be live. And so that's, that was the thinking, is that, as a one person show, maybe there is a way to, to make it available in that. What is the most surprising piece of history that you uncovered, or event that you uncovered in your research?
There's a few. When I was piecing it together, and at the same time cleaning out my mother's house because she was moving, I found the letter that was written to my grandmother, allowing my father to come over to this country because they were separated. So that was amazing. Something else I discovered was that in growing up, I never felt close to this grandmother. We had things in common. We both were performers. She is an opera singer and me as a musical theater singer. And we just weren't close. But now I feel very close to her. So that was my.
Do you think that that's because you have just done the research and in some ways made the connections that filled in the information, painted the painting that just wasn't there before?
That is it. And yeah, things that she discussed on the tape, and thank goodness I allowed her to do all the talking because she really wanted to tell her story and I just held back. I understand now, being older, why she acted the way she did, or why she was a very strong, determined, but shy person. And I can understand why she was the way she was at that time. One time I asked her, for example, I'm going to a voice lesson. Would you like to come with me? And she said, no, I know everything about singing. But it really wasn't. It was because I wanted her to come and just be with me. And that hurt. But I think I understand now, looking back, that that's not why she said. She didn't want to hurt me.
Do you think she understood why you wanted her there?
She might not have.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was, an interpretation of. It's so hard to say when you don't get a chance to,
Yeah, it's too late now.
to follow it. Now, this is your mother's mother.
No, it's my father's
Your
mother.
father's mother. I'm sorry. Yes.
Real dramatic guy.
Yes. Your scientist father's mother. Wow. How do you imagine he would respond to the show?
Such a great question. When I wrote the song about his father, I sang it to him. So he heard that and he said, touche. So he probably would say that about in reference to the show. My mother, when she was paying attention to it, said, you took a horrible time and turned it into something beautiful. So they thought alike. He might have said something like that too. That was a really good question. I think that he would be proud of it. I hope he would be. And you know what? He used to always say things like, whatever it is that you do, I don't really care. Just do it the best way that you know how. And that's kind of stayed with me. And my mother, by the same token, said, the best revenge, how'd she say it? The best form of revenge is success. So those are two strong influences.
And for when you look at the show right now, and it's just early, as you're getting ready to be out there, and it's early legs that you'll, hopefully be able to have it out on stages soon. How do you think you will measure that success?
I think it's a feeling that you get when you've performed for yourself. Did I do her justice as I'm portraying it? Did they understand this story that I feel really needs to be told? And I guess it's not measured by, oh, you did well. Oh, yeah. Oh, good job. It's your own feeling. Because I mean, I know that, I don't know how you feel as a performer, but as a performer, I'm very, very critical of myself. If I go to sleep well that night, I would say that it probably was okay.
When you were working on the show and you had questions about any of it? Is the story, the things that you just mentioned, is the story coming through? Am I painting a picture that people can understand of this person? Whom did you turn to help you, guide you through that? Was it your own internal, policing of that, or policing's too strong a word, but was it your own internal guide, or how did you decide how to edit, what to keep, what to get rid of, tone, all those things?
Yes. It was my own internal feelings and direction. And if I had questions about things, I would call my sisters and ask them what they thought. But ultimately, I was the one that made the decision as to how to portray things.
When you were performing, recently you talked about how many in the audience were wondering how many times you performed it, and it was your it was your maiden voyage on it. Is the experience that you imagined, or the feedback that you got, that they were transported in their own imaginations to similar, to their own stories in this regard? Is that the connection that was being, is that what people told you as you
Am I happy that they connected with their own parents?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's what happened for them in the watching of the story, that they saw the story that you were unfolding about your own family, and it somehow opened their own imagination or their own memories, which then kind of rides along in a dual, you have the show that's unfolding in front of you, and you also have these flights of your own imagination that are, memories that are popping in. This sometimes happens when I go to a show, all the connections that are being made. Did you hear from people in the audience? You mentioned before, people were saying how much it reminded them of their families. Tell me more about what they reflected back to you.
It's a connection. And I think that's so important, that they're watching somebody's family connection and they think of their own. And I think that that's what hopefully will make it popular, because everybody in this country is from somewhere else. Their family's from somewhere else, and they can relate to it. And that's why I feel it's such an important story to tell. So the fact that they did and they connected was wonderful to me, that it brought back those memories. Just like when I do a cabaret and I'm singing the old musical theater songs, and I go to these senior centers or anywhere, and they start singing along, or it's triggering memories of songs that they knew from long ago, is very healthy. And that's what I aim for.
Yeah, you must get a great deal of satisfaction from knowing that, the story or your cabaret is what we look for. It's why live entertainment and theater is so, and storytelling is so wonderful, and sort of, is the thing that we all long for.
Because if somebody can connect to you, whether it's, from their parents that were immigrants or songs that they knew as a child, it makes them feel good, and it helps their memories, specifically in senior centers. It's just all a good, positive thing in these times that are so difficult. You need to be able to reach out, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. That point, the neuroplasticity point of where I was watching a show last night about this, about, you make a connection with something, and then it takes you off in 20 different directions that are memories associated with that one particular time. And it expands, and grows that part, which is what's so exciting about being able to, at any age, explore the many paths that create that, whether it's theater or storytelling or putting yourself in a room with others and just creating your art out there. And as you say, it's healthy.
It's healthy. And especially with the older generation, I mean, like the seniors, where their short-term memory might be going away, the long-term and knowing these older songs and their immigrant parents is there. And somehow I feel that connection might connect to the short term, and it's healthy.
Yeah, I just imagine it gives you a very special kind of feeling to be the conduit for that and your story. I want to ask you a little bit about I want to jump and I want to come back to Her Strength, Our Story, but I'd like to ask you about some of the musical theater shows that you've done that you listed that just such a great lineup of shows that you've done. One which I've never seen in musical form, but was always a favorite television show of mine, was the Addams Family. And I wonder if you could, it seemed just ripe for musical theater. Tell me about your work on that show.
Oh, I will. I was the granny in that. And when I was younger, I used to imitate my relatives before I got onto the stage. So I had a grandmother who had the voice that I used in the Addams Family. Shall I give you an example?
Please do. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Always look at the bright side of life. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. My grandmother sounded like that. That, not the one I wrote the story about. She was an opera singer. I'm talking about my mother's mother.
Right. Oh, what fun. Do you do voices or do you do any voiceover work otherwise? It sounds like this, the vocal characterizations is something that you gravitate towards. And I wonder if you've ever thought about exploring the world of animation or.
I would love to, but it's hard. It's hard to break into. And it's it seems like it would be an easy thing, but I think it's very difficult. If I could, I would.
Yeah. I envision you behind a microphone in a sound booth, voicing an animated cartoon. Yeah, that was wonderful, Trudy. Did you think of her as you were coming up with that voice, or did the voice come first and then it was like, oh my gosh, I've just channeled my grandmother?
Oh no, I knew I was going to use that voice at the audition.
Great. Is it a voice you remember from your childhood as just being particularly problematic or wonderful? Either way. I mean, sometimes it's just like, oh, I like that voice, but after a while, oh my,
it's a little irritating.
Well, yeah, or it's charming, or it's whatever. Do you remember as a child thinking, oh, grandma,
Okay, well, I'll tell you this story. My grandparents, my whole family is from New York. And so my grandfather, my mother's father, was a watchmaker. And he was in business with his wife, my grandma Fanny, who had that voice. So one summer when I was working for Hal Prince, the producer, that's another story.
Oh, we're going there next.
On the week, okay. On the weekends, I worked with my grandparents, and so my grandfather was working away, and he's one end of the store, and my grandmother was somewhere else, and she was looking for something, and she couldn't find anything, and I'll never forget her saying his name was Leo. Leo, I can't find it. Where is it? I'm like, oh, I got to hold on to that voice. Let me store that away. I mean, it was just one summer that I lived with them, so the voice didn't really get on my nerves for too long. She was great, very strong and a real survivor person.
Of course, yeah, and you have to be. You gotta kick it in high gear if you're all the way at one end of a New York. The back of those things go back for blocks. And if you're trying to
get the job done,
and had a perfect.
He was like so calm and cool and very patient person, and he's like, "I'll be right there."
You're talking about that just made me talk about making connections, made me think about every Kafka novel I've ever written. Not to say that your grandparents should be finding it, but there's always some bureaucrat somewhere, or someone, usually a bureaucrat, either working in an insurance office or, like checking off mounds of papers. I can't remember too many artisans like craftsmen where that, but I have the distinct picture of of a New York shop in the 1920s, and all of it sounds like a wonderful. Do you think that that aspect, your grandparents and the work that they did, it sounds theatrical on some level? Do you think did that side of the family influence?
That particular grandmother had a sister who was very, very musical. In fact, my great grandfather was very, very musical. And there's a lot of music in the family that has been passed down. I have a first cousin whose daughter who's a tremendous voice. And I have a cousin who was this grandmother's older sister who is unbelievable. I mean, he just sits down at a piano and he plays jazz and klezmer music, and he's a psychiatrist by trade, but he is an amazing musician and has written musicals and has taken it off Broadway and has done, I think he was at Harvard, and one of his musicals was put on by the Hasty Puddings Company and it won an award. I mean, yes, that side of the family has, not my grandmother in particular, but her siblings were very, very theatrical and musical.
So it's in the
so
genes.
There.
Yeah. Well, tell us about how your summer with Hal Prince.
Oh, I never met him because he was vacationing in Mallorca, Spain. But my mother's sister's husband, my mother's brother-in-law, my uncle, was Hal Prince's accountant. So I was so starstruck my whole life, and my parents were a little mortified and wanted me to be able to eat. And they said, there's something we need to do to burst this bubble. So my uncle got me a job working at Hal Prince's office in Rockefeller Plaza, running the switchboard. And indeed, it sort of worked that it burst my bubble, because actors, and I was about 15 at the time, and actors and actresses would come in and they'd give me their resume and they're like, please make sure you get this to Hal. And I'm like, okay. And it was just so degrading. And I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do that. It was so. That was sad.
Trudy, I can so see you at the switchboard. There's so many between Ionesco plays and again Kafka and Dream Girl Elmer Wright. I mean, there's a great switchboard operator in every absurdist play. So,
oh my gosh. Well, you know what, he called and he didn't know who I was, and he was like, "Hello, hello, hello, hello. I need to speak to Howard Haynes. Howard Haynes, give me Howard Haynes. Who's this?" I said, this is Trudy Klausner. That was my maiden name. And I'm running the switchboard. What do you mean? Who are you? I said, I'm Warren Weinstock's niece. Oh, okay. All right. He was nervous.
This is so great. This is a wonderful story. So were you there for the summer? Did you stay longer than that?
Oh, no, I was just there for the summer.
That's all it took, right?
Yeah, that's all it took. Yeah.
Enough of the switchboard, enough of the
trains, checking my jewels to make sure they were still there. They had me deliver one time they had me deliver a package to Anthony Perkins. Oh,
what?
And yes, they had me deliver a package and I got lost because I have a very bad sense of direction. And I delivered the package okay. And then I got back into the building and I didn't know where I was. It was an underground mall. And so I called them from the phone and I said, I don't know where I am. And they said, well, could you give us some landmarks? And I said, well, there's a big this here and a big that there. And they said, Trudy, you're like right below us. Just take the elevator upstairs. But they never had me deliver another package. Yay.
Oh, did you actually? So was it like left for him, or did you actually make connection with Anthony? Yeah.
I never met him. I did speak to Stephen Sondheim on the phone a few times. That was exciting.
Oh my gosh. Oh, how fun. Yeah. I don't know. I think the switchboard position is kind of interesting because you're very much, first of all, these ideas of the old switchboard, I'm guessing this was not this because you're much, much younger, but I do love the connecting Mr. Smith with Mr. The like actually pulling the plug out and putting it in there. But even just, I don't know, there's something to long about like someone manning a desk, like who is controlling the flow to some degree, or
I'm telling you, yes. Oh, yeah. I mean,
there's stories there.
There's a lot of stories. This was during the reign of A Little Night Music, and so Hermione Gingold was in that cast, and she would call up, and it took her 25 years to say anything. I mean, she just, hello, this is Hermione Gingold. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is she going to say? And then Glynis Johns was in the cast, and she was, hello, this is Glynis Johns. I'd like to speak to Howard Haynes, please. Okay, just a moment. Well, here's this. This is Trudy. Oh, Judy, please put me through right away. And I'm like, okay, but this is Trudy. All right, Judy, just put me through. Isn't it rich? I used to imitate her in the office.
Oh my gosh, what a wonderful time, though. I mean, for you to be exposed in that way, and even if you learned, like, oh no, I will not be pounding the pavement, dropping, whatever, going in and now, was there something specific? Was it the volume of people who would show up with resumes, or was it more this just sort of desire on the part of actors and actresses to just, I guess that was a time when you generally showed up at offices, right?
Yeah.
And
they would just walk in and hand me their resume, and please make sure he gets it. Please make sure. And there were so many, and it was so pathetic. They were so desperate. And I know that actors would, like, 6 months out of the year, they would be with their resumes and getting them out there. And the other 6 months out of the year, building their ego back up again. I mean, it just is so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so was the part that struck you as the pathetic part, just that the position they had to put themselves in, really to just get a shot, get even seen?
And that's
did any of it ever go anywhere? I mean, did those resumes get passed on? I mean, was there a process?
I don't know what the process was. I mean, I would take the resumes and hand them over to somebody else, and then they just took it from there. But I should have asked that question. I don't know what happened with them, and whether they tossed them or they had to have a manager in order to even have him look at the resume.
Sure.
One really cool thing that happened, Maureen Stapleton came in because she was very good friends with George Abbott, and George Abbott shared the office with Hal Prince. And George Abbott was a really nice guy, very tall. And they were really good friends. So the two of them came in together, and somebody had, it was Hershey Chocolate sent them a big Hershey chocolate, and it was out there, and everybody was like carving it and eating it. And she went over to it and she said, I can't eat any of that. That's like bad for me. And she looked at me and she goes, don't eat any of that. I'm telling you, she was just a really nice, wholesome, down to earth person.
Wow.
The airport wife from the movie Airport.
It sounds like your summer was filled with some revelations and some excitement and some trips around New York City, getting lost, and all the things that like that space is known for, Now, did you leave there thinking, you mentioned that it kind of gave you a different look on kind of what you wanted to do. Did you really think about it when you left at the end of the summer? Like,
did I think about that whole experience?
Did you think, sorry. Yeah.
I always think about that experience. I think that whole experience, kind of opened up my eyes. I mean, my parents got their wish. It opened up my eyes not to go there and maybe do my own thing became a real strength, that I wanted to produce and direct my own thing. So I had more control over it. I didn't like the trains going there. So the last time, I go into New York and I like to visit and see the shows and all that, but I also like to get out. I'm just not a city person at all.
Sure.
But I did perform at Don't Tell Mamas. That was one of the things on my bucket list. So my cabaret partner, who helped direct and produce these concert versions of musicals, is now a state representative. So we don't really get a whole lot of time to do our cabarets any longer. But we did go to Don't Tell Mamas, and we performed there. And we did a show. This was an inspiration that was called Dustpan Diva. So this was the history of American musicals. And this idea came to me when I was teaching, because I have certification in elementary education. So I was hired to teach gifted children at Bryn Mawr one summer musical theater. And after the whole course, we had to create our own show, and we did. And then when it was all over with, there was a janitor, like Carol Burnett, walking in the back of the theater. And he said, wow, I liked what you did with those kids and all that. He goes, oh, I could tell you some stories. I used to work in Philadelphia and I met this person and that person. And I'm like, what a great idea for a cabaret. So what was born was Dustpan Diva. So there are these two janitors that are in the background of a theater, and they see all these big name artists coming and going. And the show was created, and we do all these different musical. We talk about the history of American musicals and people that sang the songs and do the songs. And we did that at Don't Tell Mamas. And it was really funny when you asked me the question about success, because my husband was at that show, and it was packed. People came in from like the Philadelphia area to see it, and then some. But before it was packed, my husband was taking pictures, and he overheard the waiters and waitresses there saying, who are these people and why do they think they can be here? And they're not going to get an audience. And it was filled. So I never knew that happened until afterwards when we came home. He's like, guess what? So I thought, oh, and it was well received.
It reminds me, as you're talking about it, like we alluded to before, the beginning of the Carol Burnett show, where she comes out with the broom and or the mop and yeah.
That's how I was dressed.
Yeah, that must have been a very exciting evening.
It was nerve-wracking. I just wanted it to go over well. But it was very, very exciting, very fun. And it was just in a great area of New York. And they really know how to treat cabaret performers well in New York. I must say that they do a split the ticket. You know, they really try to do the best for you, and advertising and, the technical end of it. And they make their money from the food and from the drink, but they want you to do well. They want you to succeed. And I sort of wish that type of atmosphere was more in Philadelphia. I don't know that they get cabaret singers. And
yeah. I'm thinking about the situation for so many years, until recently, sadly, at Latage, cabaret over, which is where we started, and not as a cabaret act, obviously, but as doing small, shorter Beckett and, other absurdist writers pieces. And that was the philosophy Jim Cale had there was, it was a way of getting started and of making a mark in an intimate space. And I think, and obviously, many people since used, that was a sad day to know that that space, so many of the great spaces that people got started in, and the great memories that, when you left after the Hal Prince summer, the summer of Hal Prince, and you came back to Philadelphia, or you decide, left New York, did you decide was it that early that you decided you wanted more control over your career and your producing? So it was.
Whenever I would read bios of artists that had created their own and produced their own, I was always so impressed with that. So I think it was a seed that was planted at that time, but I don't think I became really entrenched in the idea of doing my own thing until I wasn't getting what I wanted. And I was so angry because I would prepare and I have like the best audition of my life, and then not get it for who knows why. And then sometimes I would audition and it was like, it was okay. And I would get it. And I'm like, this is so crazy. And that's what really started that fire of, what, I'm going to do my own thing. Let's make this revenge successful, as my mother would say.
Well, it sounds as though you have performed very frequently on stages in New Jersey and the Philadelphia area in musical theater. So at what stage did that part kick in? Was that just that came along as you kind of decided, okay, I'm going to make this happen for myself in some way. I'm going to produce, I'm going to do these other things. And then that also happened simultaneously. Is there anything about maybe giving yourself that freedom, and at the same time giving yourself that control that then kind of opened things up that produced more results for you in that way? Or were the two not happening at the same time?
I don't think it happened at the same time. I think that when I was producing the concert versions of musicals, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of work, but I really loved it. So that was filed. And then I would go in an audition and I would get it. And then I would go in an audition and not get it. And it was like, I don't understand this. And I just want to do my own thing so I can perform, because I have to perform. Yeah. And as I think most performers feel, as I do, that it's you have to perform. It's not like you need to perform. It's like this, I can't explain it.
Mm-hmm, sure.
You have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do it. And that was my way of controlling my destiny. And you know what? Not everybody is going to want to hire you, even if you have your own show, but that's okay. So you move on, because it's a big world.
It is a big world, and lots of different places where your talent and your story needs to be heard. Are you focusing it in any one area primarily? Is it, do you feel like senior centers or that setting is a particularly good one for this show, or do you plan to?
I feel that it is appropriate, relevant, relatable to on any level. So I feel schools would appreciate it. I did reach out to the Constitution Center, and there's interest there. Community centers, seniors, I think any venue. And so the next one, which is on September 12th, is at the Kelly Music Center in Havertown. This is, it's a small venue. I think it seats 80, and they're expanding because they've had so many performers come in and they do singing contests. So that's going to be interesting. But I think any venue, because I just feel that there's a lot to offer within the show on different levels. And I can cater myself to that depending on the audience. I don't think that would be a hard thing to do. And that came from like improvisation. I was involved with the Tony and Tina wedding show and New York Dinner Theater show. I was Janice in The Sopranos. They called it The Sopranos. And so that was a scary time because I didn't know that I could do improvisational theater, but thank God I did it because it's just another little skill. So, if you go up on your lines, you know how to come back.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big skill. Colleague, and Sharon Geller, right? Do you know Sharon Geller?
Oh,
you
yes.
do. Of course you do. Yeah. She's going to be on the show next week, and she's, made a career out of teaching improvisation to business and to, Well, Trudy, thank you so much for taking the time. I love you. I know, I can't even believe it's like 6:00, and I know. It was just a pleasure and a joy to hear about your show, your grandmother's journey, what you're doing, and some wonderful stories of everybody's journey from what they, when they first got the idea that they wanted to perform to where they are today is super fascinating. And I wish you the best with this show. We can send, we'll make sure and put your website so that people, give it to me one more time. It's if we want to send people for tickets, or there we go. Oh, Tony Arquetti's weighing in and saying hi, Trudy. Hi. I want to make sure we get your website up there, and I don't see it. I'm not sure I had it on the sheet for Bob, but could you give it to us so we can make sure we get it out there before?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember it myself.
Oh, well, if they Google Trudy, and it's Grayboyes, Graboyes.
Yeah, that's
sorry.
I know.
Graboyes without the Y.
Y at the beginning. Yes.
Graboyes without the Y. They will find you, and they'll find ticketing information. Or could they go to Kelly?
Go to Kelly Center.
Kelly Center.
Ticketleap.com.
Very good. And it's Her Strength, Our Story. So chances are it will come up as well for people. Well, very best of luck with all of it as you move out and tell this beautiful story. And I can't wait to see you. We didn't get to the standardized patient conversation, but we'll talk about that another time.
And there's
another
Pitman.
And
because
Peter Pan.
I'm still Peter Pan.
Oh, and we didn't sing either. This happens. Well, I loved your voices, and I so appreciated giving us a glimpse into your grandmother. And I think that
I can do 10 seconds. I can do 10 seconds.
Do 10 seconds because you know what? There's no commercial break we're going to. So do 10 seconds. Do as much as you want.
Just 10 seconds because it'll take too much time to get the music up. But this is Julie Gold's song. It's called Good Night, New York. And the very beginning is so appropriate for my show. My mother came to America, sailed through the harbor of hopes and of dreams. Back in the 20s when the streets were paved with gold and the sky laced with moonbeams, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, here in the free world we're the lucky ones. That's all I'll do.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And this song is in the show.
Thank you. That song is in the show.
And you sing it beautifully.
Thank you.
And this is on Zoom. So imagine with in a room with people embedded in the story. It's a beautiful song.
It'll be exciting.
Well, Trudy Graboyes, thank you so very much. Everybody go check her show out in September at the Kelly Center. And I can't wait to see the kind of success that you have with the show, Trudy.
Thank you. My very last quote is something I always live by. Think, dream, believe, dare. Thank you so much for having me.
Those are great parting thoughts. It was my pleasure. And thanks to you all for being with us. The aforementioned Sharon Geller, improviser, actress, woman of many talents, is going to be our guest on next week's show at 5 p.m. We're going to talk to Sharon about her improvisational work. She's been on Saturday Night Live, and she's been on the Today Show, and she's done a ton of national commercials. And she also teaches over at the Walnut improvisation, but she teaches improvisational skills to neuroscientists and to lawyers. So we're going to talk to her about her decision to leave a corporate job many years ago and follow her passion. And that is Sharon Geller, friend, actress, and improviser extraordinaire, will be joining us next week. So stay dry, have a great week ahead, and thanks for joining us. We hope to see you next week at the table.